In this video, I'm going to talk about how much money you should have based on your age. So that's both your income and your net worth. And this all came about because just yesterday I was sitting down with a couple. She's 61, he's about to turn 63. And together they earn a really good income, around $220,000 between them. Now they're getting really close to retirement. So my friend Andrew and I were creating a financial plan for them. And we both looked at each other and said, well, where's your money? Because despite earning almost $90,000 more than the average New Zealand household, they didn't have much to show for it. $100K in KiwiSaver between them and a piece of land that they thought maybe one day will develop. And that's not to come across as judgmental. No, I'm more concerned because as you get older, you need to be building your wealth. Otherwise, you might get to your early 60s and wonder, well, what are we going to do when we stop working? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opes Partners. And whenever I talk about money and property on TV, the radio, or write for the national newspapers, people just want to know how much money should I have based on my age? Well, when you're 20 years old, your net worth will be lower. Your only assets might be a car, a bed, and that's about it. You haven't had the time to build up your assets yet, and you might even have a student loan or some other debt as well while you're just getting started in life. And since you are just getting started in your career as well, your income will be lower. The median income for people in their early 20s is just over 52 grand if you work full time, and that goes up to just under 65 grand in your late 20s. That means that by the time you're in your late 20s, half the people working full time earn over 65 grand, and half the people working full time earn less than 65 grand. Now, when it comes to how much wealth you should have, I usually don't like to look at the amount of wealth the average Kiwi has. And that's because honestly, I don't think that we, as a country, invests or saves enough. But for people in their 20s, I kind of think it's okay to look at what other people have and just use that as a guide, because when you're young, the money you have isn't that important. You should be more worried about getting educated and experienced because that will help you make more money into the future. So even if your net worth is negative because you've got student loans, don't worry too much about that because that's an investment to make more money later on in life. And that is why the average person in their early 20s has a net worth of just $3,000. And by the time you get to your late 20s, it's closer to 34 grand. But stick around because I have a different formula by the time you get to your early 30s. Because that's where your career really starts to get going. You should have had some good pay rises as you get experience. So in your early 30s, half of people earn more than 71K and half the people earn less than this amount. That rises to almost 75 grand in your late 30s. And this is the point where you'll also seriously consider buying your first home. After all, the median age of a first home buyer in New Zealand is almost 37, and that's probably a bit higher than you might have thought. So how much wealth should you have in your 30s? Well, when I was 15, I read this awesome book called The Millionaire Next Door, and it pretty much changed my life. In this book, the author, Dr. Stanley, introduces the wealth equation, and this is effectively how much you should be worth based on your income. And it goes like this. You take your household income, you multiply it by your age, and then you divide it by 10. Now, this formula was created for people in their 50s. So we're going to make a slight adjustment for you while you are under 40. And I actually got this from The Money Guy because when you are younger, you haven't had the chance for your wealth to build up just yet. So let's say you're 30 years old and you're earning 71K a year. Well then, by the wealth equation, you should be worth 106K, not including your partner if you have one. If you're in your late 30s, and let's say you're earning 75 grand a year at 35 years old, you should be worth around 175K according to this equation. And I really like this because it holds you accountable for your income. If you earn more money, you should be worth more. Now, I'll go through some of the pros and cons of this formula in a second, but first let's talk about what happens in your 40s. Well, you'll probably start to notice a few more grey hairs, wrinkles, aches and pains, but the median income actually goes down a bit to 73K and it hovers around there through to your late 40s as well. So the median income tends to plateau once you hit your late 30s, early 40s, because your focus might change to growing a family. But you've been working longer, so according to the wealth equation, your wealth should also keep increasing. If you're earning the median income throughout your 40s, your wealth should theoretically grow from 290K to 360K, and that's using the original formula from the Millionaire Next Door. And if you'd like to see more of these how much money should I have videos, do me a quick favor and hit the like button. That's how I know if these are the sort of videos you actually want to see more of. And honestly, it really does help out the YouTube algorithm as well. So if you wouldn't mind, thank you so much. Or subscribing, that helps too. We are almost at our goal of growing the channel to 20,000 subscribers. Now, as you hit your 50s, your income might actually start to slide. Perhaps you want more time off now that you're more set up in life and you've had time to grow your wealth. So perhaps money is a little less important to you. Well, the median income is 73K in your early 50s, and that falls to just under 70K in your late 50s. Though, of course, according to the wealth equation, you should still be growing your wealth from 360K to 400K, even if you're single earning the median income. And remember, we're just including your own personal income here. If you include your partner as well and they earn the same amount as you, then double that figure and you might be aiming closer to 800K by the end of your 50s. But it is important to say that there are drawbacks to using a formula like this. It's a blunt tool. It's just a guide. For example, if you all of a sudden get a pay rise from 80K to 100K when you turn 40, because perhaps you just changed jobs, well, that's a 25% pay rise. So the wealth equation says that you should have 25% more wealth. Well, that's not realistic straight away because you've only just moved on to that higher income. So I'd use the wealth equation as something to aim for rather than what you should have right now. And just before we get into how much wealth you should have in your 60s, let me be real with you. The second and more important issue I have with a simple formula like the wealth equation is, well, who's to say how much wealth you should have? What really matters is whether you are on track for your own personal financial goals, because then you're the person who's in control saying how much wealth you should have. And while that sounds really good in theory, I've got a team of 17 financial advisors, so I know that most Kiwis don't have financial goals written down. And if that's you, maybe that's the reason why you're watching this video where an economist on the internet tells you how much money you should have. And that is the exact reason why I built my wealth plan. Now, this is an app that you can use with one of my financial advisors to set goals and then see if you're on track to hit them based on what you're doing right now. And if you're not, well, you can do something about it. So if you want to use that tool, go to opespartners.co.nz to book your free portfolio planning session. Because if we think about our couple in their 60s, excluding their own home, they've got 100K in KiwiSaver, 220K tied up in a piece of land. And perhaps if they did have financial goals or used the wealth equation, they might be more on track because they would have known what to aim for and could have been able to take the right actions. Because remember, they're on a massive 220K household income with just 3 years away from retirement, and they don't have a lot of money that they're going to be able to use when they stop working. So according to the wealth equation, they should be closer to that $1.36 million. Now, of course, their goal is higher than the average person in their early 60s who only earns just under 67 grand a year. And so they'd have a wealth goal closer to 400K. But that's also the reason why you shouldn't just look at the average wealth and the average income figures as a guide for what you should be aiming for. Aim high and use the wealth equation as a simple guide for what you could possibly aim for. Because if you are educating yourself about money on YouTube, you can probably do a bit better than average.